what did you see happening that inspired you to kind of start speaking to men specifically?
and continue to grow it and reach out to people. And the rest is really history.
Did you have someone in your life that you were close to that was struggling?
Yeah, so I realized that, within my community and the men that I was interviewing,
Did you find that people were interested in the Christian kind of perspective?
yeah, so I did my undergrad in philosophy and religious studies, and I did my master's in business management.
All right. Well, welcome to the DH. We got Michael here, and it's a privilege to have him with us from the UK. He's over in London. And so, Michael is someone that we've been following a little bit on YouTube. He's got an incredible just lineup of guests and people that he's been speaking to. Everyone from Grammy nominated and winners in the gospel space, Martin Luther King's daughter, to some business folks from Grant Cardone's group 10X. And so I'm really looking forward to diving into some conversations. And so, Michael, I'll let you kind of do a little introduction, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
So yeah, so my name's Micah McLean, and I created Micah McLean Talks, which is a YouTube platform where we interview people in the public light to inspire, the next generation of, influencers, young people. It was originally created to cater towards men's mental health on the onset of the
Yeah.
pandemic. So it's just a privilege to be here and honor just to be interviewed by you.
Well, man, I appreciate you being here and taking the time. So, yeah, well, let's start right there. I love that your early videos, you definitely were taking a strong tilt towards mental health and talking about men. What made you want to do that? What did you see happening that inspired you to kind of start speaking to men specifically?
Right, so Micah McLean Talks, which was originally known as the Men's Talk series, actually originally came from a football project. So I know you call it soccer in the US,
Yeah, yeah.
but I used to do a football project for young men in the community. And what happened was when COVID hit, the young men didn't have an outlet. So they were reporting things like depression, anxiety. And I created a podcast as a way to give them an outlet. So that's actually where the podcast came from. And then over time, the COVID pandemic ended and the podcast started building momentum. So I stuck with the podcast
Okay.
and continued to grow it and reach out to people. And the rest is really history.
That's awesome. Let's dive into that a little bit. I love the idea of, being aware of mental, mental, sorry, that the term just left me. People that are struggling with depression, anxiety, all that kind of stuff. We've mental illness, so to speak. Did you have someone in your life that you were close to that was struggling, that kind of inspired that? Or was that something you just kind of saw and saw a void and wanted to step into it?
So a number of the young men that I worked with on the football project, they were all really stressed by the pandemic because they had no outlet. So
Yeah.
particularly one of my friends took it really hard because he's a very, very extroverted person. He likes to get out a lot. And because of the pandemic, he had to stay inside. So just hearing their stories and kind of just, engaging with them helped me to understand that I need to create something to cater towards their mental health and provide something that could hopefully help others.
Yeah, no, I love that. And mental health, that's the word I was struggling for, not mental illness. No, I love that a lot. I see that a lot in it. And I think specifically with guys, I have conversations with some of my guy friends, and then I've actually had a conversation with another guest that we've had before. And it does seem like um, guys are a little, maybe a little hesitant to engage in some of this conversation, especially in the business space. They tend to kind of hold a lot and not release a lot. Did you find that as you were talking publicly, and then also maybe in some of your private conversations, did you find that that was true? And did you find that people started opening up more? And what was that kind of experience like, getting your friends and maybe people that you didn't know to open up a little bit more?
Yeah, so I realized that, within my community and the men that I was interviewing, they were able to like really be vulnerable. And I think that toxic masculinity tells men that we're not supposed to feel vulnerable. We're not supposed to have emotions, and we're not meant to, feel pressure. And even as Christians, it talks about, iron sharpening iron. It talks about the importance of brotherhood, the importance of friendship.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
for men, it can sometimes be hard to exhibit those qualities in it and be hard to kind of interact in those circles. So starting a podcast, which originally what it was a group of guys talking every week about mental health.
Yeah.
And it mainly lost its momentum in that space because the pandemic had ended and more people were watching the podcast. So that's why I changed it from Men's Talk to Micah McLean Talks to make it more inclusive for everyone.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's really cool. I'm glad that you pivoted and kept it going. Talk to me a little about, you mentioned that you're a Christian, and so how did that influence kind of what you were doing? And then also, did you find that taking a Christian angle to it, shrunk the audience, opened the audience? Did you find that people were interested in the Christian kind of perspective? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I think that it goes back to the Bible verse that we're called to be salt and light of the world.
Yeah,
And for me, when I was opening it up to a more, bringing gospel artists on, bringing all of these kind of people that were Christians in the public light, because I came from it from an angle that everybody could kind of get something from it, it actually increased my audience.
very nice.
So, if I give you an
Yeah,
example, Tamala Man,
yeah, go ahead.
Tamala Man was a teenage mother. She had a baby at a very young age, and a lot of people could resonate with that because they were teenage parents themselves.
Yep.
Or Harvey Weinstein's lost his brother. Bernice King lost her father. So people could resonate with those stories, even if it didn't hold to the values of Christianity or believe in the faith.
That's really nice. Yeah, I do find that even people who maybe aren't Christians, still, like the stories, they like the principles, and I think like a Jordan Peterson of the world is a good example. It's the great internet question, "Are you an actual Christian?" Or, everyone's always asking them. But regardless, I think the principles and the ideas that we find in Scripture, resonate with people, and I think people find them interesting, and if nothing else, they make really good conversations, regardless if you believe in all the nuances of Christianity. I think there's a lot of good principles, so that's interesting to hear. So you went to university over in London, I'm assuming.
So it was actually in Kent. So Kent's outside of London. So I went to a university called the University of Kent.
Okay, and tell me a little bit. So you went for business and then also philosophy. Is that right?
Yeah, so I did my undergrad in philosophy and religious studies, and I did my master's in business management.
Okay. So talk to me a little bit about, and we'll get back to kind of the men, but I want to get a little bit more background. Did university help you grow in your faith, or did you already have your faith? Or talk a little bit about that journey of going through university and how that helped or hurt your faith and kind of your worldview.
Well, university is a real tough place. Like it's either going to be the place that makes you or breaks you because there's temptations everywhere.
Yeah.
So for me, I had two very strong examples in my parents who are both believers, and they gave me those principles and that way to live. So I was just kind of building on my knowledge of scripture and building on my knowledge of the Bible at university and living that out so that I could be a light to as many people as possible. But there were times in my life, even at university, where people tried to challenge me and they tried to put temptations in my way to see, okay, is this guy really a Christian? Or can we
Yeah.
kind of get into trip up in this area or that area? So it's really interesting. It's kind of like college. You call it college in America, right? Is it
Yeah. Yeah.
college?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a college in America. It's exactly the same. All of the temptations are there, all of the challenges are there. And when you're a Christian and you're living out your faith, people will always try and test you.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you, when people would, obviously you got like the natural temptations which come around, at that age, on the kind of academic, conversational style? Did you find yourself in a lot of conversations challenging the beliefs? Talk a little bit about that. Did that help you? Did that make you reevaluate? Did you find yourself kind of shifting some of not necessarily your beliefs, but maybe your approach? Talk a little bit about kind of the ironing, sharpening iron in the in kind of the public space. How did that work in university?
So particularly for me, I studied philosophy. So philosophy, most of my class were atheists or agnostics at the
Okay.
least. So it was always, as a Christian, it was always a battleground in terms of being able to demonstrate my faith to people who don't believe. So in terms of whether it challenged my faith, I'll probably say no, but did it cause me to deconstruct my faith and reevaluate what my understanding of the Bible was? I would probably say yes.
Yeah, deconstruction has become kind of a popular phrase used for the past couple years. When you say deconstruction, sometimes it has kind of a negative connotation. I personally kind of like the idea of deconstruction. Um, yeah, I don't like the idea of just tearing down stuff just to tear it down, but I like the idea of kind of deconstructing so you can kind of see what's there. It's like in a home or a building, you have a building, but what's really holding up that building? And sometimes you don't know. You take the wall off, you explore, you see the framing, you see the electrical, you see the plumbing, you see the foundation, and then you can cover it back up if you want to, but you know what's there to really hold up and add integrity to the structure. That's the way I think about deconstruction. I know that's not exactly how everyone thinks about it, but talk to me a little bit about kind of deconstruction, the way that you're talking about it, and maybe how you've seen other people use it. And yeah, talk to me a little bit about that.
So for me, it's deconstructing my faith in the sense, what is tradition versus what is scripture?
Okay.
What is tradition versus what is the move of God? So for example, for my last year dissertation, I did a study on Pentecostalism, which is, something that was very big in the Caribbean. I'm probably third generation Caribbean heritage. So my grandparents came of the Windrush era, and then two generations down is me. So a lot of the beliefs and some of the things that we hold in Pentecostalism is not scripture. Some of it is actually tradition.
Yeah.
So when I mean deconstruction, I'm literally deconstructing, okay, I need to separate what is tradition versus what is scripture. And when I look at what is scripture, can I honestly say I believe it? And that actually strengthened my faith rather than taking me away from the faith.
I love that. As you were kind of going through that process, and I'll tie this back into kind of the men and walking with, men or women. Did you find that as you were kind of analyzing, deconstructing, separating, finding out what was real and what was, maybe just overemphasized, did you find that doing that kind of by yourself in kind of like a study setting was the most beneficial, or did you find yourself having a lot of conversations? How did you find that flushing out the best?
Wow. I would probably say I had a lot of conversations. I had to really understand and get to grips with what I believed and why I believed it. And I would always say
What?
to some, oh, that's
Yeah,
okay.
go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I would always say to someone, if you've never considered what you believe and why you believe it, I would actually honestly question how strong your faith is, because we all have to
Yeah.
come to that at some point.
No, absolutely. The people, a quote that I like in I heard it was attributed to, um, one of the founding fathers. The name escapes me right now, but it was, question everything, even the very existence of God. And I think if God is who we say he is, then I think he can handle, honest questioning and seeking to understand and in those kind of thoughtful questions. Um, as you were, I was going to ask the type of person that you were having these conversations with. Were these like friends? Were these professors? Were these, people, preachers, priests, etc.? What kind of people were you having these conversations with?
A mixture. So I spoke with professors, I spoke even with my grandparents when I was doing the study on Pentecostalism and the origin of what the Windrush people, the churches they created over here. And I also spoke to like my friends as well, who also came from similar backgrounds. And it was just interesting because one thing that we're taught in, RE and philosophy and religious studies is that when you're doing a dissertation, you're supposed to get as much evidence as possible. So getting evidence all across the board helped me to really come to an understanding of really what I believed, why I believed it, and why I think in Pentecostalism we have some of the traditions that we do.
I love that. I love that. I love those kind of conversations. We'll maybe have to do another podcast and just talk about theology. Yeah, that could be a lot of fun. As you're having some of these conversations, so you get through university, you graduate, you're seeing this need around COVID, people being isolated, your friends, you're not being able to get out and socialize as much. How much of the mental health conversation was just psychiatry, psychology, just secular type, just approach versus how much did I know as Christians, we kind of see everything through a certain lens, but were you really leaning more on just like behavior during some of these conversations, or did you always try to weave Christianity in the conversations too? How did you approach that?
Well, that's a brilliant question. I mean, it was a mixture of both. I mean, I would say that a lot of my work when it comes to, even mental health, my podcasting is based upon academic stuff that I would read from sources like Young Minds and government reports, and also my faith as well. And I've managed to find a balance during the pandemic when it came to discussing topics such as mental health between the two. But you have to be able to marry up the principles of your faith and scripture with what the academics are saying and what works to kind of have a vision, a plan that actually works. Because I think it's a mixture of the two.
No, I like that. A couple people that I don't have his last name right in front of me, but there was an old friend of mine who was a professor in Florida, and he was from the Caribbean too. And I'll offline, I'll have to talk with you about it. But he was a professor. He was in like the sciences. Always talked about. He was also a Christian, and he would speak at churches and different things. And he would always talk about adapting your language to teach the principles in the church. He would do both. He would take some of the Christianese out of his sermons and talk about it more just in just like everyday conversation. But then he would also do the same thing in the workspace, teach the principles of Christ and the Bible, but not do it in a way that just made him seem like an overly religious person. And then you'd get on the other side of the conversation, and then people would be interested in the religious side of it because he was an articulate person who could lay out things on a principled base. And then you can get into more the faith base. But I think that's an interesting. I like that approach.
Thank you.
Yeah. So moving out of COVID, you start to notice, not as much of a need, maybe publicly. Have you noticed though that maybe privately that there seems like there is still a need for support in guys to have a community, in girls too, but we're guys, so we'll talk about guys, but to have a community where you can open up and talk about your struggles. And I have a group of guys that I meet with every Thursday. We have coffee together. There's three other guys and married with kids, and we're able just to, sometimes it's light and we're talking about, the golf game, or sometimes we're talking about the struggles that we have with our kids, or the hardships that we're going through, or just some of our personal struggles and different things like that. Have you found that you were able to help people create kind of new patterns and new rhythms in their life? So, because now maybe there's not a crisis, but there's still a need. And what does that look like? And what did that look like?
Yeah, I think that as I came out of the pandemic, there still was this need from, young men to kind of have spaces where they could talk about topics relating to mental health, because what we had is we had the pandemic, but then we had post-pandemic, which was people going back into society. What does that look like? I mean, it's 2015. The pandemic only ended in the UK 3 years ago. So people are still feeling the effects of lockdown. They're still feeling the effects. For some of them, they lost 3 years of their lives, and they're trying to make sense. Or they lost, family members. I had several friends that lost several family members during the pandemic, and they're trying to reconcile that. So men very much still need support, and there very much still is a need for spaces where men can be their authentic selves and talk about mental health. So I think that is still a very, very, very key thing.
Yeah. Do you a couple questions on that. On the mental health side, I've heard people talk about, that counseling has almost become like the new things. Like everyone has a counselor and they're going constantly, and it's almost just like the in thing to have as a counselor. I think there obviously are situations where that's very much needed. I've been to a counselor and family members the same. Do you think that having a counselor versus just having a group of guys, obviously, if you're struggling with like serious mental health, depression, suicidal thoughts, all those types of things, you need professional addiction. Like there's definitely a place for professional help. But did you find that a lot of times people just needed a friend? They just wanted someone that they could talk to? Or did you find that there was actually a need for deeper kind of diving to really unpack some things? Or did you find that most of it, people just were lonely and isolated?
Well, I think, yes, people do need a group of friends, but also counseling does help to a degree. There are things that you can open up with, but what I would always say to somebody is don't go to a counselor for the sake of going to a counselor. Go to a counselor if there's something you're really struggling with, or you can't open up to certain groups of people about it. And the reason why I say that is not every counselor is a good counselor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Counseling is a thing where a lot of people can see, an opportunity to make money, and you need to know what you're doing and who you're going to and why you're going to them. Because if it's not the right counselor and not the right person, it can actually do more harm than good. So it's about weighing up, you know, is a counselor best for me in this situation, or is a group of friends the best for me in this situation? Or again, with friends, it's not you don't tell everything to your friends,
Yeah.
because sometimes there's always that one friend in the group that sometimes talks a little bit too much, and you tell them something, and they tell the next person, and they might even be doing it innocently, but
Yeah.
it's important to know, okay, who are you going to? Why are you going to them? And is it going to help you on your journey? And if it is, I'd say go down either route that's best for you.
Yeah. No, I love that. I agree. I've seen so I actually lost my oldest brother a couple years ago, and through addiction, and he took his own life. And I've noticed even in that, with my mother looking for different counselors and different groups and things like that, that there's definitely different levels. And sometimes it's just finding the right person who you can connect with, you trust, you feel comfortable. But yeah, they're definitely not all at the same caliber, or you just don't connect. So I think finding the right person is really crucial. So as you're moving into, these different conversations, kind of, still not as focused on mental health, talking about people that are just in the public eye. I know recently you spoke with how many Grammys did he win, and what was his name? Sorry, his name just left me.
So it's Kurt Franklin. He's a 20-time Grammy Award-winning
Yes.
gospel artist.
Yeah, so absolutely incredible, iconic, statistics there. That's amazing. So as you're talking to these, high achieving people, still, it looked like as I was going through, just kind of doing a little research and kind of seeing some of the stuff that you've done, you definitely are talking to a lot of people in the gospel and the Christian space. You're also talking to other people as well. what is your goal? What is your objective with talking to these people? What are you trying to highlight? What are you trying to bring kind of a spotlight on with your channel?
So there's three key aims. The first one is showing people that the impossible can become possible.
I love that.
And that's demonstrating it by people who achieved impossible odds. So, for example, Kurt Franklin never had a relationship with his mother or his father. Yet he's one of the biggest, gospel artists in the world. And even in the secular world, he's known. If you look at people like Simon Woodruff, for example, the Dragons that I've interviewed, Nick Jenkins, Richard Farley, they came all from different kinds of backgrounds. So Richard Farley was in the foster system. Samuel Woodruff had a very difficult, childhood, and his marriage broke down before he became a millionaire. And also Nick Jenkins, he had to go through a lot of struggles, death threats in Russia to almost, losing his company. So what I try to show through all of these stories, whether Christian or secular, is the impossible can become possible, but you need mindset, you need resilience, and in some cases also you need faith. The second main mission of my podcast is to show people that they can be more than what they think.
Yeah,
Like
I like that.
you might have imposter syndrome, you might have self-doubt, you might have anxiety, but that shouldn't be a barrier for you to be the person that God has called you to be. And
I
the
love it.
final thing is just showing people that people are just people, whether they're worth 100 million or whether they're worth 5 million or whether they're just, just somebody with not much money at all. We're all still people and we all still have our own struggles. And just because you see somebody in the public light, it doesn't mean that they don't have issues or barriers that they've had to overcome. And you shouldn't feel less than yourself because you have struggles or you have challenges, because we all have our own battles. We all have our own mountains to climb. We all have our own trials and tribulations, but it doesn't make us any less of value or any less unique.
Yeah. I like that a lot. Being dyslexic, and so, I initially started this channel because um dyslexia is hereditary, and my daughter's dyslexic. She's 16. And when my son, who's now 19, was born, I started this thought process of I don't want them to feel the way that I had felt a lot of my life, insecure, less than, because I don't read well, I don't spell well, all these different things. And then as my daughter got older, I especially, when we realized she was dyslexic, I want her to have confidence. And anyone that knows her, she is not lacking in confidence. And so in that way, it was successful. And we started the channel because we just wanted to talk about it. And I love the idea of just understanding that we all had the same 24 hours. And some of us may have, be better suited for, technical things. I'm not a math wizard. I probably am not going to, without a lot of work, I'm not going to naturally be a great coder. But I'm really good at other things. And so understanding that you kind of have to find what you're good at. And I also say, don't necessarily put all your time on what your passion is. Maybe find out what you're good at and what you can have a natural knack for, and then let that become your passion. Because if you become really good at something, you're probably going to become passionate about it as well. But yeah, I've also realized with businesses, the more around business people, I have a moderately successful painting business in the scheme of like business. We do like $3 million a year in revenue. So it's a good business, but it's not $100 million business. But when I talk to other people who maybe are doing 10 million, it's like, oh, like we have similar skill sets. I could do that. And then we've actually made a decision not to try to grow, in certain areas. So it's also what it's done for me. And I love that you're doing this, is realizing that like, oh, you're just making different decisions. You're making different choices. You're maybe not spending as much time on these other things that I choose to spend time on. And so therefore you can grow your business more, but it doesn't make you smarter, doesn't necessarily make you better, just makes you pursue, you've chosen to pursue something different.
Yeah, and I think that comparison is often the greatest thief of joy. And the reason why I say that is I interviewed a guy called Simon Woodruff. He owns a chain called Yo Sushi. So it's one of the biggest restaurant chains in the UK. And he talked about, how he met, when he met people that had more money than him, he felt insecure. And he said, why am I insecure? I have money beyond my wildest dreams. I have status beyond my wildest dreams. I've achieved more than what most people have. And yet I still feel insecure. And he realized, you know, I don't need to have that mindset. That mindset isn't going to do me any good. So sometimes we look at somebody that might have 100 million, or they might have 100 million subscribers, or they might have 10 million subscribers, or five. And it's like, why don't I have that? But then if you focus so much upon that, then comparison will take away all of your joy. You'll forget everything that you've achieved. I mean, you've got a business turning over millions. I've got a podcast where I've interviewed people in the public light. We should always give thanks and be grateful for what we have, or we'll never be happy.
Yeah. No, I was having a conversation with my wife, I guess last year, and we were talking about this, and it was like, if you would have asked me a couple years ago, or even if you would have asked me when I was in high school or, in my early 20s, and I painted you a picture of what our life is today, I'd be like, we've arrived. We have achieved everything. Coming from a single mom who made, $14,000 a year with 4 kids, like we were poor. And so now living in a beautiful home in a beautiful state, in a beautiful city here in Boulder, Colorado, and yeah, it's easy to that comparison. It's so true. Going back to Jordan Peterson, he talks about, don't compare yourself to other people, but compare yourself to who you were yesterday. And I think constantly just trying to make yourself better.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah. So, tell me a little bit about, you mentioned one of the goals is talking about, the impossible. What are some things that kind of made you think that way? Were there, obviously you got the faith aspect, which we can definitely talk about, but were there events that happened in your life where you can point to and be like, man, this looked totally impossible, but I had a feeling, I had a passion, I had a desire, and you were able to push through that. Why does, emphasizing overcoming the impossible resonate with you?
So it all stems back to me from, high school. In high school, I was very much an underdog, both academically and in everything else. So that has always been a driver for me to kind of show the next generation of young people that even if, you're doubted, even if people don't believe in you, even if people don't believe in your potential, that if you have the right mindset, you have the right support network, and you have the right values, you can literally make the impossible possible.
Yeah.
And yeah, for me, I don't have, the biggest budget, or I don't necessarily have, the biggest resources. But one thing is I have a lot of heart, I have passion, and I work really hard. Like I put in like so much work to get where I am and get the people on that I do. So I'm just showing people that you don't need to have it all. You don't need to, be, in the UK, we have a guy called Stephen Bartlett, and I think he's in the US now.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh
Diary of
yeah.
a CEO.
Yeah.
And a lot of people want to get to Diary of a CEO level, but they're not looking at the milestones that, it took Stephen to get there. It took him years before Diary of a CEO became a big thing. I think it was about 5 or 6 years before the mainstream, actually caught attention of who he was, and Dragon's Den helped as well. But what I'm trying to say to, young people and anyone really is, if you make the right decisions, you make the right choices, you put in the work that is required. And yes, in my case, you have faith, you can literally make impossible things possible through practical steps.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about the right decisions. So when you're looking at things and you're trying to determine, um, is this the right decision? Do I double down on this? Do I keep going? How do I don't want to do something for 6 years and then get to the other side and then realize I was paddling the wrong way. Talk me through some of your thought process on making decisions, and how do you evaluate that you're making the right decisions and you're pushing against resistance that needs to be pushed against, or you're pushing against resistance that maybe you should just let that go because you don't want to fall off the cliff.
So I actually had a friend at university. His name was called Marcos, and he always says, "Do something today that your future self will thank you for."
Yeah.
And that actually governs my decision making process. So when I think of a podcast idea, or I think where I'm gonna go, or who I'm gonna hang out with, I'll think, will Micah a year from now be happy with the decision I've made today? And I
Yeah.
keep thinking that even with the guests I approach, I think about, well, if I approach this guest, if I bring on this guest, will Micah a year from now be happy that that guest came on his platform? Or will he feel a bit disappointed that he didn't stick to what he believed the platform should be? So I always have a deep thought process surrounding that. It's not just about today, it's about the future. And because I always have my mind on the future, what things will look like a year from now, what will things will look like from 2 years from now, that ultimately is what governs my decision making.
I love that. Yeah, that's really good. There's that. Do you follow Alex Hormozy at all? Business guy out of Las Vegas.
I mean, I think I've heard of his name before, but I definitely don't follow him.
Okay. Yeah, he has this, he calls it the Solomon principle, and he will write down advice as if he was, I forget why he calls it Solomon. Obviously, Solomon in the Bible is the wise man. Uh, and so he will actually like write to himself. And I think it's like a similar concept. You're thinking about what advice would my future self be giving me, or what do I want my future to look like? And I think always keeping the future in mind is a great way, health wise, business wise, relationship wise, all that I think is a great way of thinking about it. Have you, in your pursuit, and so this channel we talk a lot about business. I'm a big fan of service-based businesses, trades. There's a lot of people telling you how to get rich doing online stuff. I'm just trying to tell my story, which is blue collar. Run a painting business is my 9 to 5, and so what advice would you give? What advice would you give as people are trying to make decisions um, about their career? And then also, I mean, you've talked to a lot of successful people, in the music industry, the business industry, as they're trying to evaluate and determine the best path. What are some common denominators that you have found from the people that you've talked to, and then also in your life, that are like, oh, okay, I've connected some dots. I know for me, very rarely is it just like one conversation that I have that totally changes my life. It's when I have multiple conversations, and then I'm able to kind of connect some dots and weave a thread in between them. Any thoughts on that? Just, conversations, common things that you found with all the different people that you've spoken to.
Yeah, so if I focus firstly I'll focus upon the business side. One thing that a lot of the business people have done, which is I think is quite brilliant, is they've always realized very, very early on why they want to run a business, how a business will give them freedom, and ultimately how they want to get there. So what I mean by that is a lot of the business people are laser focused. So when I talk about the dragons, every single one of them are laser focused. For example, Rachel Eleanor Love, who is one of the original dragons, she said that she always wanted to be famous and always wanted to be on TV. Simon Woodruff always wanted to be famous and always wanted to be on TV. Richard Farley and some of the others have always wanted to be, influential business people. So from a young age, they always realized this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. And now I need to get my plan of getting there. More in the gospel scene, what I've actually found out with the gospel scene is that they managed to harness their talent very early on. But a lot of them will say that it was God that actually put them where they are. It's not what they envisioned to be. But if we look at a common pattern, whether it's the footballers or soccer players, we would call it in the US, they all have three things. They have laser focus. They know what they want to achieve and why they want to achieve it. They have resilience. No matter what they face, they are going to find a way to get around that hurdle and overcome it. And the final thing they all have is consistency. Now that's the most important of the three. If you're not consistent at what you do, then you're never going to be able to reach the heights you will get to. For example, Samuel Woodruff, he said a very famous quote that I'll never forget. He says, the harder you work, the longer you sweat, the luckier you'll get. And that is literally life. You know, if you work hard, if you sweat, if you remain consistent, you're gonna get a more of a chance than somebody that just sits on their talent and wastes it.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Um, I think something that I've had conversations with young men and women in the churches I've been to and whatnot is, they'll see a level of success in me or other people, and sometimes I think this is probably more specific to like a religious community and painting a little bit with a broad brush, but sometimes, it's like, oh, well, it'll happen if God wants it to happen. And I understand there's a level of faith, and I do believe in letting God kind of, you know, order our steps, so to speak, and help us and guide us. But you have to put your hands to the plow. You have to get your hands dirty. You're gonna sweat. You're gonna have some long nights, and things do not come easy. They come with a lot of resilience, like you said, and a lot of consistency. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Talk to talk to me a little bit about faith. So I've grown up in the church. And so we'll pivot a little bit because I this is just a personal interest of mine. And so when you see uh I get my first question would be, where do you see the intersection of kind of business and faith? And what do you think that should look like? What do you think it does look like now? And like what could businessmen and women of faith be doing better? So I guess to start off, that's a lot, but like where do you kind of see that intersection of faith and business right now?
Well, I think the main intersection between faith and business ultimately comes down to values. Like if you're a Christian and you're running a business or you're running any kind of enterprise, people should be able to see the difference in your values rather than, the secular business world where it's solely driven by money, no matter at what cost. So that should be the real intersection. Like people should be able to notice that you're a Christian from the way you do business, from the way you treat people in business. Whereas the corporate world, which at many times can be very ruthless, that's really where the intersection should be. And I would say that's probably the heart of business is more the values center where the main intersection is. Because business is business. It's about making money. It's about scaling your business. It's about being profitable. But where I believe the real intersection should be surrounding your values. And the second part of your question?
Yeah. So how do you think we're doing with that? How do you think the Christian, and obviously this is kind of a broad question, but just the people that you interact with, or maybe the people that you see, how do you see that playing out? Do you think that Christians are representing that well?
Well, it's a big question. I mean, for Christians that I've interviewed, I can't say for all Christians,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
of the
yeah, yeah,
Christians that I've interviewed, I'm trying to save myself here.
yeah.
I would say they're doing a good job. I mean, but one thing that I think that Kurt Franklin said very recently is, you know, he has so much ambition when it comes to business, and he's driven by a desire to not be forgotten, which he said is not always a healthy desire. But I think if most of us are honest, sometimes when you're running a business or you're becoming successful, everybody wants to leave behind a legacy. Everyone wants to be remembered for something. But I would say that sometimes, as Christians, just in general, and I'm not even saying this specific to business, but just in life, sometimes we have to measure up the desire to have an impact and not be forgotten versus, remaining true to the principles of what we believe. And that can sometimes be where the biggest challenge is.
Yeah. I like the topic of legacy. It's something. I'm 41. When I was younger, I thought a lot about legacy, and you want to, uh, not to get on a hot topic, but you think of someone like Trump, who I grew up, watching, Donald Trump in business and on The Apprentice, and me and my brothers looked up to Donald Trump as a businessman, And, the idea was like, that's a legacy, right? You have your name on buildings. And, as young, immature people, it's like, I just want to be famous and I want people to know my name. And then you have kids, and then that begins to morph into what the actual meaning of legacy is. And I've even gone for full circle where I was like, legacy doesn't matter. No one's going to remember me in a couple generations. My great great grandchildren probably won't know my name. And although that may be true, I've kind of so I went from thinking about legacy to thinking it's not important to kind of coming full circle to thinking, like, even if they don't remember who I am, living a life that will try to, not in a selfish way, but in a healthy way, live a life to where there is a legacy. And if they remember, good, but it's not for the sake of remembering, it's for the sake of who I am. And then also hope for the future. It says in scripture, hope deferred makes the heart sick. And I think a hopeless generation, a hopeless person, is someone without a legacy in mind. Have you personally, in people that you talk to, how do you think about legacy and what does that mean to you? I'd love to kind of riff on that for a minute.
Well, in terms of the legacy I want to leave behind, legacy probably means to me is I want to be remembered as being one of the podcasters that completely changed the game in terms of really focusing upon discussing the issues that were important to society with people of influence. I think in the podcasting game, podcasting is almost becoming like music or sport. We're becoming oversaturated with podcasts, but there's very few quality podcasts. And I think sometimes when it comes to podcasting, sometimes less is more. Like it's better to have like less podcast episodes that are more impactful than having loads. But so what I want to be able to show the world and for the generations to come is that you can have a quality podcast. You can actually talk about influential things. And, whether that means I win awards or I win none, what it is for me is I want to leave that kind of a legacy. So the generation behind me, they can think about, okay, I want to have a podcast where I can actually talk to people about important topics. I don't have to, dumb down my podcast or just talk about things in pop culture and stuff. I want to be my authentic self on the screen. And one thing that I've been really moved by is the amount of people that are starting to kind of help me build that legacy or kind of help me build that branding surrounding myself. So even recently you have The Apprentice in the US, the person who is the host of The Apprentice in the UK, Lord Sugar, recently gave me a mention on social media because I interviewed one of the candidates of The Apprentice. So for me, that is a legacy because if there's a young person from my background or a different background that wants to have an impactful podcast, they'll see what I've achieved and they'll be like, okay, I can do it too. So that's more what it means to me in terms of legacy.
I love that. Yeah, to be honest, it's something I'm still kind of wrestling with as far as like what I want that legacy to look like outside of like my family and my kids and things like that. Ultimately, I want to help people. I love that, and that's one of the reasons we do this. The DH, the Dyslexic Hustle, it doesn't generate any revenue for me. It's something that we're building, and I love the idea of having young men, young women, in older. But my heart's always really been towards helping the next generation in a really productive way. I know there's different, churches do that in some ways. There's conversation to be had about like how well are they doing and what could they be doing better and those types of things. But I think having a life without legacy in mind is kind of like having a life not thinking about how the decisions today are going to affect your future. I think having something to live for is purpose, is kind of more or less what it's all about. So on the topic of God and faith, um, what what is Christianity to you? What is your faith? Talk to me a little bit about that. We got different denominations, we have different religions. what is Christianity to you? And yeah, tell me about that.
So in a nutshell, Christianity to me is, I just really want to go back to the heart of the gospel, which is, Christ dying for the sins of the world. And, what it is to me is it's Christ, reconciling himself with even someone like me, and
Mhm.
me living that out. Because even though I'm Pentecostal, I would probably say inferior and probably more non non like, I'm not a part of any really denomination, as it were. It's more,
Mhm.
I have my faith. I mean, I go to a Pentecostal church, but I have my faith. But it's more, okay, Christ saved me. How do I express that love to as many people as possible so that they can hear the gospel and they might experience some of the joy that I have? So that's more how I try and
I love
weave
it.
it into my podcast. Like, a lot of people don't always see what happens behind the set. So on the set, it might be focused about business and stuff, but you'll be surprised with the amount of people behind the set that have actually asked about my faith or asked about what makes me me. So it's really powerful. It's about, following Jesus and living that out so that as many people as possible can come to knowledge of who God is.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. The there was something specific I was going to ask you, and it just left me. Okay, so what do you think the church is doing really well right now, and what do you think we could be doing better? Speaking to people like ourselves who are in the business space, talking with business people, consulting, etc. Where do you think? Obviously, there's the core message. Basically, you just laid it out very beautifully. What would you like to see kind of more emphasis on, or I shouldn't say more emphasis, just addition to, to help people in the business world? Any thoughts around that?
Well, often I think the biggest issue when it comes to, particularly, in my community, when it comes to business, I would say sometimes Christians don't always understand the business world as well as their secular counterparts do. So I believe there was a part of the Bible where Jesus said that, you know, um, the secular world is usually more on it or more swift to do things than
Mhm.
sometimes Christians are. And that sometimes in business, sometimes I think Christians can be too polite because we're supposed to be humble. We're supposed to, be salt and light. But the business world can sometimes be very ruthless.
Mhm.
So sometimes, we look at scriptures like be as wise as a serpent, yet as gentle as a dove, and we overlook those kinds of verses. Business is business, as I said before in the interview. Business is business. So the church is very good at, sometimes collecting like offerings or collecting, money in through donations. But when it comes to actually entrepreneurial ventures, the church is not has not always built that infrastructure.
Nope, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yes, no, that was it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
No, some of the conversations I've had with different friends. So I actually come from a long line of preachers. My granddad on my mom's side and my uncles and cousins, they're all preachers. I was actually almost ordained twice and decided not to and go more the business route. So it's something that's close to my heart and physically through family, and then also just desire to help people. I agree. I think the idea of building up kind of an ecosystem that helps perpetuate funds and resources in a very transparent way, I think would be interesting. We obviously see churches that get, build up a lot of money and revenue and different things. I would argue that the transparency is lacking on a lot of that, and it kind of gets abused sometimes. Again, rabbit hole you could go down, but I love the idea of having that mindset of entrepreneur. Um, Something that I've thought about in the context of church is Elon Musk, when he started, doing the Tesla car. He took, I think it was the Lotus. and was trying to use that framework to build the Tesla. And it's something ridiculous like one piece he ended up using. And he said he would have been better off just to start from scratch because he spent so much time trying to modify and change and make it work that if he would have just gone to ground level and started from scratch, it would have been quicker. And I think sometimes we take, traditions, and that's why I like what you said before is like, what is the scripture actually saying versus what is just tradition and, things that we've adopted, but really getting back to ground level. And I think we would find a lot of things that we do today aren't really necessary. And so would make us more efficient.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, coming up on an hour here, and I wanted to just ask if you said you want to be talking about things that are relevant and that are important for society. What are some of those things that you're seeing right now that would be important to talk about? And what are some things that maybe that people aren't talking about, or maybe that are a little contrarian thoughts or conversations that you think we should be having? I would just be interested to hear kind of your thoughts on that.
So one of the topics that I think that a lot of people don't hear enough about is being your authentic self, being true to who you are. In this and my next interview, can't say the guest is, but the next interview that I'm about to, the next person I'm about to interview, they're also in a public light, but they brought their authentic selves to the reality TV series that they were on. So for me, what it is that I think that a lot of people need to be taught about being their selves, because we're in a society where everybody wants you to be a robot. They all want you to think. Not everybody, but like when I mean everybody, I mean like the media. They're
Yeah.
kind of perpetuating this idea that everybody has to be a robot. Everybody has to think in the same way. Everybody has to, you know, have certain values that is shared collectively. But but our uniqueness is our strength. So if you take that away, there's no strength behind, people. So what I would say that we need to be talking so much more about authenticity. Another issue that I would say that people need to talk about, I think, and I've probably need to touch on this more in my own interviews, is trauma.
Mm.
Because sometimes people go around in a cycle and they've never dealt with the trauma they might have experienced in their childhood, their adulthood. So life just keeps going in full circle because you're never able to get over that one moment in your life. The third thing I would say is also money. So when I mean money management, how to invest money, how to make money. I think that a lot of people know how to spend money, but they don't necessarily know how to make it.
Yeah.
And what we're actually seeing, and even in the UK, is that as we're approaching a difficult financial era, people need to now be more entrepreneurial, think outside of the box, because in a cost of living crisis, more people are struggling. So they need to know how to, make money and how to invest their money wisely and not just go for quick rich schemes where they can lose money and gain money quickly. So all of those three things, I think, are three very pressing issues in society.
Yeah. No, I love that. I the self, the authentic, being authentic, I think is really important. It's easy, especially with social. You see the highlight reels, and that's not really what's happening. I have a great life, but I also fight with my wife sometimes, and you know, sometimes my kids make me angry, or I make a bad decision, and I think obviously there's a level of privacy, but there's also just like if you're gonna put your Ferrari up, also maybe talk about the bad decision, and if you're gonna, post the picture of the six pack, it's like, well, I didn't always have this, and this is all the food. This is how much food I didn't eat, I starved myself for 6 weeks or whatever it was to get to that. And so I think that is really important. The trauma is interesting, and kind of in closing here, I'd like to just touch on that. What makes you interested in that? And this is a topic that I'm very interested in. If you don't mind elaborating on that, is that something you've just seen people dealing with, or what what makes you think that that is relevant? I agree with you; it is relevant. But what's kind of made you? go that direction.
Well, I've interviewed like many different people, and not just interviewed many different people. I've come across many different people, and if you mention certain topics to them, you see their body language. So you might see their legs shaking, or you might see them getting a little bit upset, or you might see them, sighing a certain way. And it's like, I think that trauma is something that if you never deal with it, or you can't find a way of dealing with it, it follows you throughout your life. So you'll never have the freedom that you truly deserve as long as you're focusing upon trauma. And that's one thing that I've learned from interviewing all the people I have, and it's not all of them that have it. But there are a few case studies I would say, and I won't say it on this podcast, but there are certain things that, you know, people have to deal with, and very traumatic situations that people have to deal with, death of a brother, or, being abandoned by their parents. And that's completely understandable. And it's okay to experience trauma, but it's also important to be good to yourself. And I'm just fascinated with, you know, how do we help people that are going through trauma so that it doesn't continue to affect them, and not and most importantly, that trauma doesn't go down generationally? Because sometimes when you don't deal with a certain trauma, it affects your kids and it affects their kids. And
Yep.
it's a very, very scary thing, but it's also at the same time a very powerful topic to discuss, because I think that people need to be able to find freedom from trauma and ways of coping with it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I've experienced my own share, and I've watched people struggle through that. I do know, even like I referenced earlier, my brother who took his life, and trying to, just walking with my mother, dealing with my own grief and the hardship with that, and then helping her. Um, it's a hard thing to navigate, and sometimes time helps, but time doesn't heal all wounds. Effort in being proactive, and in our case, our faith plays a big part in that. But then I also think that there's things outside. um I I believe that God's created certain principles and put certain things in place. I love that. I use gravity all the time. It's like I can ask God to save me, or I can just recognize that God put gravity in place. And if I, step off this building, bad things are going to happen. It's like you can just recognize God's system and plan that He's already put in place, and then understand that you have to kind of work within the game that God has created, for lack of a better term. Any On the trauma side, obviously talking about it is great, brings awareness, helps people feel comfortable talking about it. Anything that you've come across that is helpful, resources, channels, people to talk to, follow, that are good to help people understand what's going on, and then also how to overcome.
Yeah, so there's been a couple of case studies that I've, looked at through my podcast. One is therapy, but finding the
Mm.
right therapist. So usually you can get, particularly in the UK, you can have therapists that have lots of recommendations, are highly sought after. Second one would be self-help groups. So where you can get groups of, men and women that have been through the same thing as you. That's a great
Mhm.
release. There was a particular entrepreneur that did that to get over, his divorce.
Mhm.
And the third thing I would probably say is, read books. There are lots of books on, handling trauma. There are lots of, things you can do with regards to mental health. But also, I'm only saying what I've seen. I mean, I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
So I would
Yeah.
just put a disclaimer at the bottom. This is just my viewpoint from some of the case studies I've done. Might not always
Yeah.
work, but from what I've
Yeah.
seen, those are the three main things that, guests on my platform that have experienced trauma, the things that they've
Yeah.
turned to help them through it.
Yeah. I would echo that. I think the groups, firsthand, I've seen that being, that has been the most beneficial for my mother, finding a group of support that have also lost loved ones in similar ways. That has been a really great tool. Reading is always helpful. But yeah, in the community, I would even say, for someone who's maybe not struggling with like as dramatic trauma, maybe like the loss of a loved one, I know a guy here locally that they're all into fitness. They do extreme sports. These are like men, they're all, very high achieving people, but once a month he cooks a bunch of meat. They all sit around a fire at night and they talk and they have that brotherhood. They're able to just be vulnerable. There's no phones, there's no electronics. It's just them and their brain and each other, and they get to talk about life and what's been going on. So kind of full circle back to what started all this for you is just talking to people and helping people not feel isolated. Sometimes I think just letting people know that, like, hey, it's okay to not be okay. That's a really hard thing that you went through, and let's walk this together. So, man, I so appreciate you taking the time. I am so excited to watch your future and the things that you do. I'm a huge podcast kind of junkie. I've always got one playing. Yours will be at the top of the rotation, and I'm looking forward to hearing the incredible people that you bring on. And hopefully, we'll get a chance to do this again, and we'll be able to see the things that are changing and see the improvements and the things that you're learning. One of the things I love about these conversations is I love talking and I love interacting with people, and so I love that I get to speak to people like you from all across the world and learn. So, tell us the best place to find you. We'll link to your YouTube channel in the description, but tell us anything that we need to know about to watch you, connect with you, etc.
So in terms of YouTube, I have my YouTube channel, Micah McLean Talks. I also have an Instagram page called Micah McLean Talks. That's where you can see updates on all of my podcasts and everything that I'm doing. And those are the two main platforms at the moment where you can really connect with me while I'm building this channel.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you for joining us here on the DH. And until next time, bye.
Thank you.